This is the Pro Audio Suite podcast. Quick Bites.
Welcome to another Pro Audio Suite Quick Bite. This week we're replying to an email that was sent to us about industry jargon and what these words mean. Robbo, you got the email in front of you.
I do.
Think,
Bob Leedom, who's been in touch with us before, wrote to us and said, "Hey, again, guys, I've been thinking there are some audio terms that you and others often throw around, and some of them are less familiar to laymen like myself. Could you please elaborate, possibly on a quick bite?" Well, the answer is yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
So the first term that he's asked about is diffuse field, which I got to be honest, I don't even know. Anybody got the answer to that?
I'm looking at my glossary. By the way, I have a glossary on George the .tech in the free section.
There you go.
I don't have one. I don't have a definition for diffuse fields. I'm gonna have to add this.
I think I can. Right, but it has to do with like often microphones that are designed to pick up in a diffuse field or a non-diffuse field. A diffuse field of a room would have lots of diffusion, lots of scattering of your sound, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Here's a one-sentence answer, and it won't help. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Theoretically, diffuse field is defined as a sound pressure field where there is no privileged direction of the energy.
Oh, okay. There you go.
There you go.
In other words, when sound pressure is the same everywhere in the room. This is obtained with large rooms, no absorbing materials on the walls, ceiling, or floor.
There you go.
It's maybe the opposite of an anechoic chamber.
It sounds like it.
It does sound a bit like that, doesn't it?
It's one where there's
Also sounds a bit like the Acoustic instruction manual for the LE3.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm not putting that one in my glossary.
But what's interesting is like high-end microphones like the B&Ks will give you different capsules that you put on, like caps that you put on top of the capsules for recording the Omni in a diffuse field or a less diffuse field.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
But it's definitely about the room and how much diffusion is in the room. If you have
We've definitely used the word diffusion a lot.
Yeah.
I never talk about the terms diffuse field personally. So
a lot of diffusion results in a diffuse field.
Okay.
Right.
All right. There you go.
It does.
That's a good answer.
Yeah.
Nice and simple. All right. The next one is also pretty simple. Soundstage. Being a radio imaging audio engineer, the Soundstage is my friend. So that's basically in stereo, your Soundstage is left to right. In 5.1, it's left to right, front to back. And what's the overhead? Is it 9.1 or 7.1 where you've got overheads? 9.1?
742.
742. There you go. Where you've got left, right, front, back, and up and down.
that's the Atmos standard, right?
Well, Atmos can go up to like whatever
22
20 million
channels?
speakers. Yeah,
22.2 or something.
like basically it's like stereo. Is it surround in 2D? Is it 3D going surround and up and down? And there's your sound stage.
I guess the simple way to think about it is think of your speakers set up as a stage, and whereabouts on that stage everything goes to fit nicely in the mix.
When you're mixing, it's not always about level. It's also about where you organize the sounds in that space to bring clarity to things.
Beautiful.
There's also another definition for soundstage.
Okay.
A soundstage is a soundproof hangar-like structure, building, or room used for the production of theatrical filmmaking and television.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's not an audio, like that's a soundstage.
a
physical
like,
thing.
shoot.
Yeah.
Which is so funny because usually a soundstage has cameras in it.
Yes, it does.
Right. Yes, that's right.
It's a stage where you can record sound and it's been treated for sound.
Yeah.
That's how I think of it.
Next, air frequencies.
Oh, air
So the
frequencies.
very high frequencies, like, like even like 20K and way up there, that just brings air and lightness and sort of a glassy sound to the whole.
It's the
thing.
polish.
Like,
It's the polish at the end of the process, isn't it?
there's EQs that have like air band and things like that, but it's just
there's even the Scarlett Solo Generation 3 that they've added a button literally
air
on the unit. It just says air.
Yeah,
And it does just that.
Just take your high shelf EQ, put it at like 14K or higher, like even 14K, and goose the gain up, and then you've got some air.
Yeah, it's like above sibilance. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
Well, my Sebitron preamp has an air switch.
Does it really?
Oh, really?
There you go. I thought that would be for long sentences, maybe, or something like that. The air, you kick the air switch in.
It goes bright, flat, and air.
My Avalon mastering, like tube mastering 747, has got a high frequency graphic, and it's at 32K. But you'd think you can't hear it, but you put that up, it's like, man.
But it's not only 32K though. It's a slope.
It bleeds down. It bleeds right. Exactly.
It's a shelf. The more you increase that high shelf, the more the frequencies below it are increased. So you're really increasing probably a fair amount at like even maybe 12K, or 18K. Yeah, it just depends on the slope of that, the shape of the curve.
The width of that band, exactly.
The Q.
And nice. I think also because it's so high up there, any resonance it has are maybe farther out. Maybe you don't hear them as much sometimes with EQs. When you're turning them up and down, you get resonances and weird distortions near the crossover points.
Here's another one to do with frequencies. Forward mids.
So turning the mids up.
I guess so, yeah.
Having good, like 2, 3, 4K, kind of good volume on that.
Yeah.
Headphones can have forward mids. Like I think the Austrian audios have a forward mids, for example.
So we're talking more pronounced in generally. Is that what we're saying here?
More pronounced in the mid-range frequency, the voice range.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think of forward mids as being kind of like high mids, actually, for some reason.
Yeah. Well, that's where my mind went.
I think high mids.
1 to 4K?
Yeah, exactly.
1K to 4K?
Yeah, exactly. Like you could call mids like, down to even 300, like 1K down to 300. That's lower mids. But when someone says forward mids, I don't think of 300.
That's what makes all this jargon kind of nebulous sometimes. It's like what it technically means versus what it really means can be two different things. Or technically means versus what it figuratively means. Like we've given in our minds a meaning to what it means to add air or have forward mids, but it is still pretty subjective what that actually means.
Okay.
Indeed.
Next one. Robert, this one's for you. Gain staging.
So you typically in any signal that you're recording, you have even your microphone. If it has if it's an active microphone like a phantom powered microphone, it's going to have some gain built into it in a sense, and then you're going to plug that into a preamp. Many preamps have two knobs: the mic sensitivity and then the output knob, and then that might go into a line input that also has a knob that you can turn it up. Any one of those points is a stage in your gain, getting to your ultimate place where you are recording. So stages might, think of them as steps. Maybe at one end, you could clip it at the beginning and then turn it down later and make it so no red lights go on, but you're still clipped because you clipped the first part of it, turned it down later. You turned it down in the wrong place. So it's still sounding clipped. You just have a lower volume of a clip. So proper gain staging is to not clip any one of those points and get the volume to the point where you like it. Also, proper gain staging is recognizing that sometimes some preamps work optimally maybe in their middle level. And when you start turning them up too loud, that's when they start to get noisier. So maybe you want to only work your preamp, at 50 decibels or so, and then get the rest of your gain from your line input. And that might be cleaner than trying to make your preamp do all the work. So that is gain staging.
God, you just described that so much better than I could have.
Well, I've got a question for you then. Based on that, what is the difference between gain and trim?
Nothing.
That's the same thing, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think of trim as not adding anything, but only removing something. But that may not be true.
Why is that?
I think of trim
because you can trim
controls
up, you can trim down.
You can trim up and down. Yeah, I think like English versus American, I don't know, trim, gain, level.
Yeah,
Yes.
I've always thought in my mind a trimmer was just designed to reduce, not add more gain.
The Avid trim plugin gives you plus 12 if you want.
Huh.
I'm looking at my 1073 and it's got both. So what would
If anything, think of gain as the gross setting and trim as the fine setting. Typically, if you have a gain knob, it's going to, especially on some of your older, English preamps, it snaps you're 10, 20, 30, 60.
Yeah.
Just snaps to those settings. And then you can trim it. You can fine tune it with the trim plus or minus.
That's how the Grace M101 is.
Yeah.
You have
Because that's the
step
same.
gain control, and then you have a trim that's fine tunable.
Okay. Well, let's answer that question. Yeah, because I'm looking at the 101 as well. And yeah.
Well,
Cool.
I wanted to mention a way that people run into trouble gain staging in your typical, very simple home studio is someone will have a Scarlett and then they will buy like a preamp, and plug it in. And they don't realize they're really going through more than one preamp now. So they're going through their outboard preamp and they're going through the Scarlett preamp. And then what can often happen in that scenario is even if you turn the input gain on your Scarlett all the way down, the output of the mic preamp can be higher than the input stage of the Scarlett can handle. And that is a place where you can now introduce clipping and distortion. So you got to be real careful when you have that. I try to encourage a lot of people that are new to home studios to simplify, stay away from outboard gear, and because it's just more to go wrong, especially if you have a mixer. A mixer has like at least five different places where there's
you
a
get
gain
the fader and the
stage
gain and the overall knob. Yeah.
Well, every link in the chain, somewhere you can introduce distortion, right? Pretty much. So that's what
right. Anywhere there's an amplifier.
Yeah. And you're absolutely right. Like in gain staging, you have to keep in mind of what the next stage is capable of handling, because even though you're not clipping the output of something, you still might clip the input that you're hitting next.
And in an Apollo, when you start piling a bunch of plugins that you don't know how to use, I see people's Apollo setups and I'm like, what have you got going on over here?
you definitely have gain staging in your DAW. I see this all the time. Like people record their music and they will record it as high up as they can go on the meter. And then the guy who's mixing this has to get all this stuff and mix it. But now everything's already at 10. So what do you do when you add a bunch of things that are at level 10? If you put the faders at 0, now you've clipped your output. And sometimes what a lot of guys mixing music will do is they'll just take all the audio and do it like a clip gain on the DAW and just bring it all down by 10 or 20 decibels. So they've got some room to mix the stuff.
Right.
Because if not, the other problem is if you bring it down on the fader, now you're trying to work your fader at the bottom of it and you've got no resolution to it. You barely move it and you've changed it by like a crap load of volume because you're at the bottom of the fader. So that's another example of gain staging, where you want to turn those things down so you can have your fader working in the place where when you move it a little bit, you get a little bit. And if you move it a lot, you get some, but it's not all drastic where it's so touchy that you can't fine tune your mix and really get it narrowed, zeroed in.
Yeah.
All right. Just to wrap it up, George, one for you, latency settings.
Oh, latency settings. Well, this is might actually be directly what you might see on Source Connect, right?
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
The buffer, you mean?
Yeah, it's AKA the buffer. So it's the time it takes the computer to take the audio coming in and encoding it into digital and then pass it on to the software. And the lower the latency setting is, the less delay that there is in that process, but the more likelihood that some bit of that data could get dropped along the way. So when you have higher latency / higher buffer settings, it generally is going to be more reliable. But if you're doing real-time communication, then you're going to have a longer delay or a longer latency. Anything more to add than that, Robert?
I do. Latency is not echo. You are hearing your latency when you hear an echo, but it is not echo. Right. So we hear a lot of people come into tech support and they're like, I have latency. Everything has latency, especially when you go through the internet. There's time. What they mean and what we have to kind of extract out of their emails or whatever they're saying is that actually they are hearing an echo, which is caused by latency, of course.
That's one of the hardest things about tech support is interpreting other people's misused jargon to describe the problem. It's one of the skills of doing tech support.
Yep.
So the interesting thing about this quick bite is it's actually made me think about things that I just take for granted. So the question I have for Robert then, or both of you, because you both pretty much do tech support, is would a good way to describe latency be digital delay? That it's actually sort of getting held up in the digital world and so it's delayed by a few microseconds or longer?
I would describe latency as any time that a process imparts onto a signal.
Okay, yeah. So it takes time for that process to happen. Is that what we're saying? Yeah, processing time.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, that's a good answer.
And therefore, you don't hear it, or whatever you're doing to it does not happen immediately.
Yep.
It is latent.
Yeah. It's not like you switch on the radio and the sound comes out of the speakers. It's you switch on the radio, it goes through a process, then it comes out the speakers. Yeah.
Right.
So would this be the equivalent of vision and sound when you see something in the distance and the sound comes later?
Yeah.
There's latency in the space-time continuum, right? You see it.
Yeah.
There's less latency in visuals because visuals travel at the speed of light. Speed of sound is significantly slower. So therefore, there's more latency in that event as you experience it. Latency absolutely has to do with a point of observation, right? Like if it takes time to go from point A to point B, you're at point B. You do something physically and you're kind of in both places at once, right? You turn the knob directly, but you're also standing in point B waiting for the output of that result. And it happens later. Therefore, there's latency in your experience between turning the knob and hearing the result of turning that knob.
It's something you have to manage a lot when you're working to pitches with plug-in counts on tracks and channels and all that sort of stuff that you have to keep an eye on, definitely.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, for sure.
Well, there you go.
He did mention one more thing, but I think we might keep that for another quick bite because it's actually a separate subject. He's talking about how to interpret a frequency chart for microphones. So
that's another topic.
We might keep that one up our sleeve. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, at least I know what my trim and gain knobs do now.
There you go. Just leave your knobs alone.
Yeah, that's right. I'm going to go and have a twiddle.
And when you go have yourself a trim, watch your knob.
Well, that was fun. Is it over?
The Pro Audio Suite recorded using Rode NTG5s and Source Connect. Edited by Andrew Peters and mixed by Voodoo Radio Imaging with tech support from George the Tech Whittam. Don't forget to subscribe to the show and join in the conversation on our Facebook group. To leave a comment, suggest a topic, or just say g'day, drop us a note at our website, proaudiosuite.com.